starting a new parak, which is always nice. Of course, we just came from a amazing parak, but we're starting now. We're starting now chapter 19. So we just concluded chapter 18 of Tanya, and in chapter 18 we really delved into a lot of the themes, which were very powerful and were really not only applicable to sort of the narrow question at hand of how do I understand this natural love, with these two questions of how do I inherit a love and where my soul is found, which is officially what we did in the chapter. But much, much more than that. You know, the discussion obviously was much deeper than that in terms of really understanding how this impacts us, how we personally, how the Jewish people as a whole are really so impacted in terms of our relationship with God, because this natural love is in this place beyond intellect, and therefore every Jew in their relationship with God, it's not only the knowledgeable ones, it's not only the studious academic ones, it's not only the ones with the gift of information, but every single Jew has a deep, deep, deep relationship to God, as we've seen many times, as we said, of Jews that didn't choose to live for God, but chose to die for God. So those were some of the takeaways, some of the gains from chapter 18. Now we're starting chapter 19, which is also a very powerful chapter of Tanya. And in chapter 19, of course, we know we're going to answer 2 more questions, because we said that our goal was to focus on 4 questions. So in chapter 18, we discussed how we inherit a love. And we're not really inheriting a love, but from our ancestors, we're inheriting a soul, and the essence of the soul is God, and therefore there's that natural self-love, in essence, for God. And where the souls are found, being in that seminal wisdom and the chachma of our soul, with all of the ramifications of that concept, as we're saying, of having this peace of God giving me a relationship with him that has nothing to do with anything but it is. Not because of my achievements, not because of my accomplishments, just because it is. That is the amazing gift, that this peace of God inside of our soul, that my relationship to God is buried in a place that's far deeper than intellect. So now, starting chapter 19, we have 2 more questions. The goal being that when we finish chapter 19, we will have a basic understanding of this natural love. And once we understand it, we're going to try to talk about how I feel it. But first, I have to understand it. So in chapter 19, we have 2 more questions we want to answer. The first question, which is the vast, like 90+% bulk of this chapter, is what does she want? Every soul has a desire. You know, you love someone, which means I want to be closer to them. So what does this love want? And that's, as I said, like 90+% of the chapter. And then very end of the chapter, we touch on the last question, the 4th question we're going to be discussing, which is, where does fear, awe shine in? Meaning, if I'm talking about a relationship with God, it's not enough just love. It's not going to get where I need to be. So if we're saying through this natural love, I achieve what I need to achieve, I have the relationship with God necessary for the purpose of my soul's existence in this world, there has to be that component of fear, of awe. So where is it? So that we touch on at the very end of the chapter, and that's rather quick. But the bulk of this chapter, it's not short, is understanding what this love wants. What's the desire of this love? And as we'll discuss, this love is sort of unusual. And we'll see why. So looking inside chapter 19, and for additional explanation, now that we finished 2 questions, we have 2 more to go. We want to focus on a verse. This is from Proverbs. Ner Havaya, the candle of God, Nishmas Adam, is a soul of man. So that's King Solomon's words, why are we talking about this in Tanya? We're not coming to, do analysis of scriptures. But we're talking about it because we're using it as a springboard to understand the dynamics of the soul. So we're saying it wasn't just like King Solomon, Shlomo Melech, wanted to say something beautiful and poetic. The candle of God, the soul of man, that's such a beautiful words. No, he meant something very practical. He meant something very real about understanding the soul as this flame. So we're going to look a little bit at understanding a flame to understand the nature of the soul, which is being triggered by this love. Peirush, meaning to say, Shey Yisrael, that the Jewish people, Hakaruyim Adam, Ner Havaya Nishmas Adam. The candle of God is the soul of Adam. I translated it as man, but there are a number of words for man. Adam, we're told, refers specifically to the Jewish people. Adam refers to the Jewish people. In other words, we could say the whole world, all life has a soul factor. In a sense, my cup has soul, has its spiritual component. And of course, the 8 billion humans in this world all have soul. But when I say Ner Havaya Nishmas Adam, the candle of God is the soul of man, Adam, I mean uniquely the Jewish soul. As the verse says, Atem Karuyim Adam. You, the Jewish people, are called by this term for man, Adam. Why are we called Adam? For various reasons. It says Adam is from the term, why do we call man Adam? Adameh le'elyon. Adameh. I'm similar to the Most High. So every Jew is even more intently than the rest of the world in the likeliness, in the vision of God. As it says, there's a beautiful teaching of the Rebbe that if we can envision this metaphor, this is parenthetical, but I think it's really nice. We envision this metaphor of a silversmith, and he has a piece of silver, a chunk of silver that he needs to work with. Well, silver is not pure. It has all these other more base metals in it. So he needs to sift them out, which he does by putting the silver in the fire. And as the fire gets hotter and hotter, the other metals coming away, and he's stirring away, cooking his cauldron, and the silver is coming more and more pure, that everything else is just being burnt away. When does a silversmith know that this is a moment? This is exactly at this point. This is pure silver. And if I wait too long, it's going to start getting ruined by the fire as well. It says when the silversmith can look in the silver and see his face reflected. When the face of the silver is the face of the man, then he knows it's exactly at the point to pull the silver out of the fire. And Lubavitcher Rebbe says, that's God in us. We're like that chunk of silver, and God puts us through the fire. But as we're being put through our fires, what's that point that we're getting to? When you look at the Jew and reflected in that is God. And that's Adameh le'elyon. That every one of us in essence really is in the likeness of God. Another idea, just one more. Adam is the numerical value of the word ma, meaning Adam is Aleph, Daled, Mem. The Mem is the same Mem, and Aleph and Daled, 1 and 4 equal 5, which in the Hebrew is Hey. So Adam is the same numerical value as the word ma. And ma means like what? The question, the place of not knowing, openness, total negation of self. And that's, in essence, in our core, the core of the soul is that space of the unknown, that space of complete nullification to God. And that's why we're called Adam. So in either case, or for other reasons, Atem Kruyim Adam, when the verse says, when King Solomon said, the candle of God is the soul of Adam, man, Adam means the Jew. So therefore, this concept of the soul being like the flame is specific to the Jewish soul. So the soul of the Jew is like the flame of this candle. So what are we thinking about in this flame? shemisna'anea tamid lamayla. That's always flickering, flickering, flickering. Of course, we know that. We're all fascinated by flames when we were younger and just staring at it. And it's not static energy. It's always flickering up and up and up. Betivo, by nature. It's not a big intellectual decision here. This is just the nature of the flame is to flicker upward. Well, we all know that, but why? So the Rebbe said, let me tell you why. Mipnei she'or ha'esh, because the light of the fire, chafetz b'teva, desires by nature. We've used that word just like a millisecond ago, and we're going to keep using it. It's very important in this context. By nature, lipare me'apsila, to separate from the wick, uledovik b'sharsho l'mayla, to cling to its source above, b'yisod ha'esh ha'klali, in the comprehensive element of fire, shetachas gagal ha'yareach, under the sphere of the moon, which is explained Kabbalistically. So the Rebbe here is saying, now that I've established that the verse, the soul is like this candle, refers to a Jewish soul, let's talk about a flame a bit. So we can understand the flame, and then we're going to apply that to understand our soul. So what are we looking at in the flame? There's lots of elements in the flame, of course, and Hasidus speaks a lot about a flame. But the vantage point here is the flame's energy is always moving up. Hasidus in general looks at movement a lot to understand things. So a flame is flickering up, a flame is flickering up. And the Rebbe says there's a reason why. Because the flame, by nature means like, don't ask questions. It's irrational. I can't explain it. It's just me. So the fire can't explain to you why, but she just wants to be back to her source. And the source of all fire, we're told, is out there in the heavens, under the sphere of the moon, somewhere out there in the galaxies. And as such, since the flame wants to go back to her source, and since her source is up there, she's always, always flickering upward to become one with her source. Now, this idea of being one with your source is really not unique to fire. And as Hasidus looks at it, everything has a movement of wanting to be back to its source. That's sort of the nature of all nature, is this movement back to one's source, back to one's roots. But it happens to be for fire that the roots are up there. So therefore, the movement to go back to your source is this ascending movement. Now, the Rebbe is going to say, this is really quite irrational. Why is it irrational? Because if she got what she wanted, so to speak, and she wants to be one with her source, she would lose her existence. You have a little flame, you have a candle, Shabbos candle, Havdalah candle, Hanukkah candles, we know all about candles. You have a candle, you have a little flame. Forget about the source of all fire. Pretend you were by a bonfire, like Weimar's coming up, there'll be a bonfire, and you're holding a little candle. And the flame jumps into the fire, as actually could sometimes happen. So the flame jumps into the fire. Well, what happened to that flame? Gone. I mean, she doesn't have her independent existence. And she's completely subsumed and lost in that comprehensive fire. Now let's talk about the source of all fire. So why does she want this? It's like a double suicide. She's gone here because here there's a candle without a fire, dead, so to speak. And she's gone there because in the source of all fire, what's this little flame? Nothing, gone. So she lost her existence here. She lost her existence there. What is she gaining? It's not about what she's gaining. It's just about what she wants. Well, why would she want this? That's her teva. That's her nature. Okay, so let's read that inside, because then we're going to apply it to the soul. Even though if she got what she wanted, she would be completely extinguished. Well, obviously she's not shining below because she left below to go above. And also above in her source, she got what she wanted. So the flame ascended to the source of all fire. But she's been completely nullified. What's one flame in the source of all fire? Nevertheless, this is the desire of fire by nature. Don't talk to me about reason. What does that have to do with anything? This is its nature. Okay, so I see some people joined in as I was going through this. So let me just briefly recap this idea. So we're in chapter 19. We're answering the first question that we're going to answer for 90+% of the chapter. What does this love, this natural love, want? To understand what it wants, we're comparing it to a fire because of a verse in Proverbs that the candle of God is the soul of man. So our soul is like this candle, this flame, which says specifically the Jewish soul. So what's fire? Fire by nature has a desire to move upward, to reunite with the source, that the source of all flame is beyond this world. As Maimonides actually speaks about at length, Maimonides explains the 4 elements, fire, earth, wind, and water. And he says they're organized in this world in a fashion of like the most solid, the most dense, and then progressing away from that point. So it should be earth, then water, then air, and then fire. That is the strata, as Maimonides explains it. Earth, the most dense, as the center, covered by water, which is a liquid, it's lighter, covered by air, a gas, covered by fire, which is the energy. So it's obviously the lightest, most amorphous of all of them. Our world isn't like that because we do have some land over water. And of course, we have a lot of land underwater. So the Maimonides says that's God's kindness. When the verse says, Olam chesed yiboneh, the world is built on kindness, that's God's kindness. Because really, we should all be underwater, but that'd be a little difficult for life. So therefore, God made some areas of the world where there is land over the water, as well as under the water, so we can exist. But that's the stratas. And therefore, the highest strata is fire. So the fire on this world wants, as all things in essence wants, to revert to its source, to refuse with its source, to unite with its source. And therefore, the fire is like flickering up, 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 as if, it doesn't ever probably happen, but as if it could escape the limitations of being a flame and fly up back to the source of all fire. And the Rebbe says this is a crazy desire because it's a double suicide. On this world, you're done, you're gone, a dead candle. And above, what are you? Nothing, a little flame in the source of all fire. So why do you want this? It's my nature. That's how I'm wired. That's my instinct. Okay, now that we understand that about the flame, let's apply this to the soul. Because when Shlomo Melech, when King Solomon said that the soul is like a flame, again, he meant that it truly is, which means there are characteristics that it shares. So let's understand that. Kach nishmas ha'adam. So too the soul of the Adam, of the man, of the Jew. And not just the level soul called neshama, because our soul has 5 levels. Nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. So when I say neshama, I don't just mean that level 3 soul. I mean all of the soul of the Jew. Chetza v'cheshka b'tiva. By nature, again, I told you that was a key word in this section. By nature, she just has this irrational desire. What's her irrational desire? To separate, to leave the body. To cling to her source. With the ultimate source of all life, God. Even though if she got what she wanted, she'd become like nothing. She'd be completely nullified, wiped away from her existence. Her with the essence, with God, of all life, of all source, and that one little soul, she'd be wiped away. Nothing would remain from her original existence. So what does she want this for? Aren't we all in the building myself up mode? Self-advancement? Self-improvement? What is she doing? Something that will wipe her away completely. Nevertheless, this is her will, by nature. This is how she's wired. So the Rebbe is saying this metaphor of the flame is very much instructing us on the nature of our soul. So just as that fire has an irrational desire to be fused with the source of all fire and leave her current existence completely. That's what my soul wants. So we said for the flame, it's a double suicide because she's not here and she's nothing there. It's almost like that for our soul, but not completely. If the soul achieved this desire, well, here there'd be nothing. If the soul leaves the body, the person's dead. The soul's not there anymore. There's no life. So that's a death, a suicide. What about if the soul ascended above, which she wants, to be one with God, the source of all life? That's what she wants. Well, it wouldn't be like the flame with the source of all fire, because her existence wouldn't be like zapped away. But the Rebbe says it's like the slate will be wiped clean, meaning all of her developed capacities and strengths, all of her history would be gone. She would still exist. She's not destroyed. A soul would never be destroyed. But everything of her growth and momentum would be gone. So in essence, as if almost she's wiped away completely. So what does she want this for? It's her devil. It's her nature. It's like we say, on a desire, you can't ask questions. It doesn't have to be rational. So guess what? This one isn't either. And of course, not only is it not rational, it's in essence not what God wants from us. It's not fulfilling her mission in this world. Souls are in this world because God has a need for a soul to be in this world. We say this is actually the challenge of the tzaddik. The completely righteous person is challenged by a desire of his soul to leave this world. Now the Rebbe is telling us all souls want this, but our soul's voice isn't so strong, so it's not so much our struggle. But for the perfectly righteous, this is really a struggle point. In the language of Kabbalah, it's called ratzu, the racing desire to leave and just fuse with God, which will be interpreted in this world as death. And we're told, no, you have that racing desire, that's great, channel it, come back down to planet Earth. Ratzu, shuv. You have a racing desire to leave, take all the energy of that movement to come back down and do another mitzvah. Come back down and reconnect to God as He and you can truly be one. Because when I choose to do a mitzvah, when you choose to do a mitzvah, when you choose to do a God commandment and serve God, you are absolutely one with Him. We just don't feel it, because if we felt it, we would cease to exist. But it's actually happening in this world every time we study Torah, as we are now, or do another commandment. So we're supposed to be here. This desire of my soul is not just irrational to us because we think we have a different priority list. It's not what God wants, seemingly. But yet it's still wired in the soul. It's still something the soul wants. And as I'm saying, if we understand this Ratzu Shuv dynamics, the racing out and the coming back down, that desire to race away is beneficial if we don't allow ourselves to give into the desire. If we channel it and force ourselves to come back down, the desire to leave is great. It's an impetus to do more and more. I want God, the unattainable God. I want to be one with me. So what do I do with all my desire to be one with Him? I do another commandment. I study. I don't have to open the book. I found it on my computer. I found my phone. I study His Torah. When I study His Torah, when I'm doing His commandments, I am one with Him. So my desire to be one with Him and leave everything to be one with Him is good, as long as I don't give in to my desire, as long as I channel my desire and connect in the ways I actually can connect.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What do you mean that when the soul leaves the body, its slate is clean? I thought that a soul, when it leaves this world, takes all the good that it did with it. Like, why is the slate clean? What does that mean?
Thank you for asking. I guess I wasn't clear. What I meant was, if he leaves, she leaves, really, the soul is feminine, in this fashion, not a death, as we understand a natural death, where if someone passes away, the soul remains intact and goes through a process of disengagement from the body. So the soul is completely intact. But this experience, which Kabbalistically is called klois hanefesh, the extinguishing, the expiring of the soul, is like the soul just choosing to leave because it so wants to be subsumed with God that it abandons its life here, which again is not our challenge, but really is our challenge deep down. We just don't feel it. And it's in an overt way the challenge of the completely righteous, of the tzaddik. In that situation, if there was a klois hanefesh, expiration of the soul experience, and the soul fused above with God in this like, I don't care, I'm just giving it to my desire. Like sometimes we just don't care, we're just gonna do what we want, if we should or if we shouldn't. So the soul is like, I'm done, I'm just doing what I want God. Well, then at that moment, the soul becomes so one with God that all of the developed energies of the soul become like washed away in God's presence. Like she's so close, she sort of melts. And she doesn't lose her existence because the soul can't be destroyed, but I guess that's probably the best metaphor, thinking like everything just sort of melts away. So everything she developed is gone. So like, what's she doing it for? Because that's what she wants. You know, we speak of like the Jews by the giving of the Torah, right? 3,333 years ago, we were all there, and God revealed himself in a way he's never done since, till we have the complete revelation of Mashiach, of the redemption, and all of our souls just like jumped out of our bodies, because like, that's it, that's what I want, like, what am I doing here? And God graciously had the angels put them all back with the dew that will revive the dead. But that movement, if you just gave into it and we didn't have the coming back down to this world, you know, restoration of our souls, is not a natural death. And as such, what happens to when a person naturally passes away is not what the soul's going through. It's going through a very different experience. And that's why it gets like wiped away by the energy. But thank you for that question, because I wasn't being clear there. Any other questions? So we're saying that the soul has a desire that is the opposite of how we normally envision our desires. Because we normally think of, I want things that build me up. And here the soul wants something that would wipe her away. But she still desperately wants it. Why? Because that's her nature. So what do we mean by this word nature? So that's what the Rebbe is now going to explain. Find my place. So when we're using this word nature, the Rebbe says it's a code word. It's a borrowed term to cover everything that's not coming from a place of reason. It's not something you logically arrived at. V'gam kan, so also here, hakavana, the intent, that this, when we're saying this desire of the soul, this wanting of the soul to leave the body and just be fused with the essence of God, is not coming from any level of reason, because it would destroy her. So obviously it can't be coming from a reason. A reason will build you up, not break you down. It's not coming from reason. It's coming from a place higher than reason. Just as we discussed last chapter, in chapter 18, we spoke about this love being embedded in the chachma, in the seminal wisdom of the soul, in a place beyond intellect. And therefore, every one of us can access it. So also here, this is not rational. This is actually higher than reason, because reason's box. Reason's limited. This is limitless. So where is that place that's higher than reason? Oh, we know. It's the chachma. It's the seminal wisdom of my soul, what we were discussing at length last chapter. Sheba, or in Zohar, in which is the infinity of God. In other words, the core of my soul is God. It's not a glimmer of God. It's not a little trickle or ray of God. It's him in his essence and being. So my soul, our soul, in its core, is God. That's the self of every Jew. If I really strip away everything else, I come to this place of self, which is God. So if I understand that, then this counter-instinctive desire of the soul, so to speak, actually makes sense. It's the soul saying, I want to be me. I want to be what in essence I am, absolute God. It's counterintuitive because the most fundamental desire is a desire to live. And we don't usually want to break down our existence. We want to enhance our existence. And when you see people living through horrible situations, I mean, obviously, we could think of the Holocaust as examples, but of course, there's many other examples of people living, and we say, like, why do they keep going? Because there's this intense desire to survive, survival instinct, desire to live. So this idea of breaking down, of losing an existence, is like the antithesis of that. But yet here, if we actually understand it, it's actually the core of the soul. Sometimes a breakdown is building up. We think of it in nature like with the seed rotting in the earth, right? So you put the seed in the ground and there comes your tomatoes. Well, what happened? Well, the seed rotted. And that breakdown was necessary for there to be that growth. Or we think of it in Torah in the famous example of Reb Zera, an Amora, who lived in Babylonia, sage of the Talmud, who wanted to ascend to the higher learning of the Jerusalem Talmudic approach. He was in the Babylonian Talmudic school. He was a sage of the Babylonian school, and he wanted to ascend to a very higher level learning, which was the Jerusalem Talmudic learning. And it said he fasted many fasts to, as if, break down everything he'd previously acquired so he could be open to this newer, higher approach. So the soul, in essence, is saying the same thing. I want to be one with God. In my core, that's what I am. That's what I want to be. So I want a breakdown of my existence to really access my existence, to go higher, to become the next level. It's interesting because the Rebbe speaks about this. Not exactly this concept, but sort of similar, that everyone was talking before about the stratas, and the Rebbe says that every level has a desire to become subsumed in that which is higher than it. So the inanimate becomes part of the vegetation kingdom. The vegetable kingdom becomes within the animal within the man, right? So all the minerals and things flow into the plants, and the plants are the food kingdom for the animals, and the animals come into us. So we have inside of ourselves animals and plants and minerals, everything. But where does man go? The minerals, the inanimate, can go to the plants, and the plants go to the animal, and the animal can go to man. So each one's achieving a higher level of existence. Where does man go? So the Bible says man goes to God. Just as the inanimate wants the vegetables, and the plant kingdom wants the animal, and the animal wants man, he achieves his fulfillment by becoming part of God. So in a smaller way, that happens every time I serve him. Every time I do a mitzvah, every time I do God's commandment, God and I become one. Every time I learn his Torah, on a much deeper level, God and I become one. So it's happening. But the soul here says, I want this big time. I want this completely. Don't give me at this moment with this point of connectivity. I want it completely, which means I want to lose everything to achieve that essence desire of being absolutely one with God. So this is really an expression of that love. All of this is to explain to us, we said in this chapter, we're going to be answering this third question: what does this love want? You said every love has a desire for something, has something it wants to achieve. What does this love want? So everything we've been discussing here about the soul with this irrational, counterintuitive desire is a product of this love. Because this love is different than all other loves we have. Even in its spiritual source, it's different. As we explained last chapter at length, and we just referenced now, this love comes from Chachma. It's from the seminal wisdom of our soul. No other love is found in Chachma. All loves, besides this one, all godly loves we have, love for a fellow Jew, love for Israel, love for God, lots of loves we have as from our soul. It's all coming from the level of our soul called Bina, understanding. This love uniquely comes from Chachma, from seminal wisdom. So there's a very big difference, because Bina, understanding, means I'm using my mind, I'm thinking, I'm processing, I'm coming to a greater and greater apprehension, understanding of God, which naturally leads to a love for him, or a love for those things that he loves and he wants us to love. So it's a natural, calm, logical process of self-growth, of self-enhancement. That's when it starts off with being an understanding. This love isn't seminal wisdom, it's in Chachma. This love is not about understanding, because we said this love is rooted in that place in seminal wisdom that's beyond understanding. So in its core, it's irrational. It's got nothing to do with reason. So normative loves are an understanding. They're rational. This love isn't seminal wisdom. It's irrational. Normal loves want a greater and greater growth toward God. This love is not about growth. This love is about losing everything. This love couldn't care less. Me, my self-enhancement, it's like, like most of the world is wired to want money. And the more money I acquire, the more I feel I'm gaining. And there are those people that just literally couldn't care less. They don't care about it. It's not in their, not in their perspective of values of life. They just don't care about it. So normal loves want self-enhancement, self-growth, improving myself and getting closer and closer to God. This love says, I don't care about any of that. I don't care about me. I don't care about what I'm gaining. I don't care about what I'm acquiring. I just want God. Well, you can lose yourself in the process. What do I care? So normal love's from understanding, from Bina. This from seminal wisdom, Chachma. Therefore, normal love's rational. This is completely irrational. Rational, meaning it's all about self-growth. This is about self-destruction, in essence, if you really got what you wanted. So it's completely different energy than any other love, which is why normally loves are compared to water. Loves come from chesed, right? Kindness. The symbol for kindness is water. A love is a flow of water. Nourishing, quenching, flowing water. That's love. This love isn't about water. This love is about fire. Love flows down. This love goes up. This love isn't water. This love is fire. And it's very important for us, and it's made us what Jewish people are, that we have this very irrational, very fire-like connection to God. I sometimes think, this is just my thoughts now, you don't have to accept them, but I think God, you're so lucky, because we love you so irrationally. This really makes no sense, this relationship we're in. But it's got nothing to do with sense. We irrationally love you, and conversely, you irrationally love us. Like, we've stuck to you through all these years, and you stuck with us through all these years. And there's reasons on both sides to think this rationally makes no sense. But that's nothing to do with the Jew's relationship to God anyway. It's a very deeper than reason relationship coming from this love, from that core of our soul that's pure God, which is this love. Any questions on anything that we've said so far? Any questions on anything? Feel totally free to ask. Okay, so let's keep going. Please feel free to ask. Don't wait for me to ask you, because by then you forgot the question, right? This is the rule. I'm giving you a principle here from everything on the side of holiness. That all holiness, all things on the side of godliness are an extension of chachma. They're an extension of seminal wisdom. Shenikra kodesh ha'elyon. Another term for chachma, for seminal wisdom, is the supernal kodesh. Kodesh is the roots from which comes what we call kedusha. Kodesh ha'elyon, the supernal kodesh, comes down into kedusha, into things of holiness. If you see the word kadosh in Hebrew, we would usually translate it as holy. But the real technical translation is separate. The real translation of kodesh or kadosh is separate, is remote. Because ultimately this level, its roots, chachma, seminal wisdom, kodesh ha'elyon, is remote from everything. As we said, totally beyond the cap of all called intellect, beyond all that. But it's the roots from which trickles down everything of kedusha. Everything of holiness has in its roots this energy of chachma, of this totally separate state beyond reason relationship with God. Habata b'metzias bar Sof baruch. Now, if I'm saying everything on the side of holiness is enrooted in chachma and seminal wisdom, which is why it's called kedusha, because it's from kodesh ha'elyon, chachma, the seminal wisdom. What is the identifying characteristic, the trait of chachma that can be tasted in everything of kedusha? And the Rebbe says the trait is nullification to God. In other words, I want you to understand how this works. We are talking here about this irrational love because it comes from chachma, which is an irrational place of your soul. And now the Rebbe says, let me broaden this concept. Everything of holiness comes from chachma. Everything that's kadosh comes from kodesh ha'elyon. Everything that's holy comes from the source of all holy, the ultimate kodesh, separate, chachma, seminal wisdom. Which means everything is flavored by it because it's the roots of all. So what is that flavor that everything holy tastes like? Nullification to God. Now we learned this, of course, in a far simpler way all the way back in chapter 6. In chapter 6 of Tanya, for those of us with good memories, because I'm sure it was quite a while ago. In chapter 6 of Tanya, the Rebbe says, what is the magnet for God's presence? Like if you ever wondered, how do you bring God to you? Very simple answer. Nullify yourself to him. Nullification is the magnet for God's presence. Ego is that which repels him, and nullification is that which attracts him. So every time I put my will on the side to do his, I become a magnet for God's presence. And it's so easy because he has so many things he wants from us. And probably many of them are not what my natural go-to would be, except that this is God's command. So it could be minor things that don't really have a big stretch in me, like making a blessing before I eat. Or it could be things very, very, very difficult and challenging. And we all have the easy and we all have the difficult and challenging. And every time, it doesn't make a difference what the command is. Every time I'm doing it, even if it's easy, it's an act of nullification to God. Meaning, I have no problem saying a blessing. But God, the only reason I'm saying it is because you want me to. If you didn't say, I want you to say a blessing, I probably wouldn't. If you didn't say, I want you to have as many children as you can, I probably wouldn't. Now that I have, I'm very grateful, but that doesn't take away from being an act of nullification. And then stretch to those things that are difficult, that as we're doing them, it's a big, difficult stretch. Now, maybe for someone, saying that blessing is a big, difficult stretch. And maybe for someone, having those children is a big, difficult stretch. So it doesn't make a difference what it is. The more one is really nullifying themselves to do God's will. Oh my gosh, you want me to say this whole long prayer to you in the morning? It takes a lot of time, and I'm pressured, and I'm busy, and you want me to say every word out loud, and you want me to think about what the words mean. Like, that's a very difficult stretch. Great. Because the more the stretch, the more this proactive nullification, the more God's found. It's a magnet for his presence. The Rebbe is saying this is the identifying marker of everything of holiness. It has to have a nullification to God. And if it doesn't have a nullification to God, it's not holy. However good it sounds, however smart it sounds, however logical it sounds. I was learning with class yesterday that Manufa was on. We were concluding the book of Rus, of amazing, great work for those people looking for something else to do with their life. And it was bringing out there in connection to it, the story of Doeg Hadomi. I'm not going to go into the whole story now. This is more a reference for people that know what I'm talking about. But Doeg Hadomi, just very briefly, was a very brilliant Torah scholar, the head of the rabbinical court, known as the Sanhedrin, without any nullification to God. So he sounded really good because he was really smart, really glib. But if you thought about what he was saying, this is really smart, but it's got nothing to do with God's will. So is it holy? No. Well, it's full of Torah. So what? It's a disgrace to the Torah because it's not nullified to God. So that's always the barometer of holiness. Is, do I see that it has chachma in it? Do I see it has this point of nullification to God in it? Yes, holy. No, and it's not. Then it's not from chachma. So why do we care? Because what we're saying here is inside ourselves. The fact that we have the seminal wisdom containing God inside ourselves, which gives us this irrational love for God. This love that if we actually completely indulged in it, we would, so to speak, be breaking down our own existence. This means it's really with him, because this is really about what everything of holiness is. Complete nullification to God, letting God absolutely shine through. So again, God's desire isn't for us to give into this desire. God wants us to live on planet Earth and serve him. But the more we can tap into this desire, the more we have the momentum to let God shine through. It's not about me. It's about God. It's not about my gain. It's about God. It's not about, like a lot of times in life, we think, well, what's in it for me? A certain channel in our brain, what's in it for me? Even in good things, like, well, how beneficial will this be for me in doing this good thing? I don't mean beneficial like in a superficial way. I mean like in a real way, in a godly way. How beneficial is it? Which of course has a certain place, but there's also a certain point where it's not about you. It's not even about your spiritual gain. It's like, I don't know if this is correct to give this as an example. Well, I'll give something that I think is more correct. In the previous generation, times of the previous Rebbe, the Rebbe Rayatz, he would encourage all of his followers to be completely invested in education, which of course in Russia meant, tremendous danger. But not only were we talking about the physical dangers, but he was talking about people that were like great Torah scholars, very high, lofty levels. And he was telling them, go out and, educate ignorant Jewish children. And I'd be like, for me? Like, why would I do that? Like, obviously, there's many people that should do it, and it's a very good work, and it's a very godly work, and it makes sense, but it's not for me on my level. And it's like, you're right. But what does that have to do with anything? It's not about what's for you on your level. It's about what's God's need. And so too in our world, in our situation, sometimes we're confronted with things that, I don't know if this is, as we say, pasik. I don't know if this is for me. And the point is, it doesn't have to be for you. If God has a need, that's what he wants you to do. And that's that point of spiritually, not only on a physical way, nullifying yourself to God, in a spiritual self-sacrifice for God. The Torah scholar teaching the little children the Aleph Beis is a spiritual self-sacrifice for God. Someone wants to learn Torah all day and study, but there's a community that needs him to be a rabbi. He's like, I don't want to be a rabbi. I don't want to deal with all these people and all these difficulties and all these issues. There's plenty of other people that can do that. I want to study. But guess what? Maybe there's no one else willing to take the job. So spiritually self-sacrifice. What's in it for me? It's not what's in it for you. It's what need does God have? So all of this comes from the seminal wisdom, from the chachma, from that irrational peace, that it's not about me. It's about God and God's needs. And it all trickles down into my nullification to God. That what I'm doing is for him. Even if it's not spiritually beneficial for me, so to speak. It's not about that either. It's about God. Any questions on any of this?
When you say nullify, you mean bitul?
Yeah, I mean putting yourself aside to do his will, which is what bitul means.
Bitul. Okay. And that comes from chokhmah.
Exactly. We have that ability from chachma, and everything in the side of holiness has that ability from chachma. That in everything of holiness, its roots is chachma. If we look at the word bitul, Rachel raised the Hebrew word bitul. That maybe is a good just reference point for this concept. Bitul means self-nullification. Bitul is the same letters as the word litbol, tibul. Like when one goes into a mikvah, into a ritual pool, they do the act of tvila, which means immersion. So bitul, having those same letters, is because it's also this concept of like immersion, like a completely immersion of self within God's reality. And that's that place of bitul. That's that place of nullification to him. So let's continue here. So we spoke about chachma, habatel b'metzias b'reinsof baruch hu, that's completely nullified to the infinity of God's energy, hamalubash bo, that's engarbed in it, ve'eno davar b'nei asma kanal, and is absolutely nothing of its own existence. So the Rebbe here, to tell us the intensity of chachma, of seminal wisdom's nullification to God, uses actually a technical term. It's bitul, nullification, b'metzias. B'metzias means in existence. Now, when we speak about this idea of bitul, of nullification to God, there are two types of nullification that we discuss. One is called bitul hayesh, the nullification of the yesh, of the self. And the other one is called bitul b'metzias, which means the nullification of one's existence. And there's a very deep difference between the two. Bitul hayesh, the nullification of self, is the idea of, it's more normative, it's the idea of my existence is nullified in the presence of a greater existence. Like, I'm full of myself. But if I'm in front of my boss, I'm nullified because it's my boss. And my boss, my manager, my executive, he's full of himself. He's the boss. But if the CEO comes to visit, he's nullified because he's in front of a more powerful existence than his. So there's a process of coming more and more nullified to God that's bitul hayesh. that we feel nullified because we recognize God's power, which is overwhelmingly more than ours. I'm creation, he's creator. Okay, we're done. Bitul hayesh, nullifying myself in the presence of his much greater self. But that's still not the ultimate nullification, because it still means I exist. Just my existence is currently squashed. Bitul b'metzius means I don't even exist. My whole existence is a manifestation of the higher existence, in this case, of God's existence. And that's what seminal wisdom has as this point of absolute nullification. It's not bitul hayesh, feeling nullified in the presence of God, who's God. It's bitul b'metzius. There is no existence to talk about because it's just completely wiped away in the presence of God's power in being one with God. So this is seminal wisdom's absolute nullification, which trickles down to the rest of us. So from seminal wisdom comes that love, that irrational, completely nullified love, which comes the pulse of my soul, which comes me, the Jew. If I realize it or not, we all come to those points where we just give in to God, even if it doesn't make any sense, even if there's no gain, because I'm a Jew, because he's God, because that's our relationship. Okay, we will stop at this point. So we actually did quite a lot because no one had questions. So we will continue this next week. Does someone have something they would like to share from the past week? Something that's happened that you'd like to thank Hashem for? Like to share a miracle or something kind or good that God did for you?
I have a couple stories to say. So the first miracle.
We missed you last week, Rachel.
Well, I miss you always, but this is really was very powerful today. It was amazing. So, so yesterday was Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes Hilula, right? And my husband lost his phone, and it was dead. So I called and we couldn't find it. He looked, I looked everywhere, and then I said, "Hey, today is Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes Hilula." So I put money in the tzedakah. I washed my hands. I said, "Rabbi, the Elokad Rabbi Meir Aneni." And I said it a few times. I went straight to where the phone was, where my husband already looked. And so I said, it works, you know. It was such a miracle because it just took like 30 seconds for me, and it always worked. I put tzedakah, I wash my hands. If I lose something, I said Rabbi Meir, Elokad Rabbi Meir Aneni, and I find what I lost. So that was really, for me, it was a big miracle because it just shows you it's so real. You're so connected to this tzaddik, you know. Another thing that happened to us is that, you know, we're selling the house and we had to remove our oil tank, which is a huge deal here because if you have contamination, then the price is very high. We wouldn't be able to close on the house. So they were supposed to come Friday or Monday. They showed up Thursday. And on Thursday, I said, okay, I will daven later because I had to do other things. As soon as they came, I took the siddur and I started davening. And by the end of the day, the inspector came and everything was okay. And they took the thing. I mean, somebody in our area, they had to spend like $20,000 to clean it up. So that was such a miracle. So the guy who took care of it, we called to thank him, and he said, "Don't thank me, thank the Rebbe." I don't know exactly what happened there, but so that was an amazing miracle. So we are ready to go almost, Bezrat Hashem.
Bezrat Hashem.
Few more
Thank you
days.
for that a $20,000 Yeshua. That's very
Yeah.
valuable.
So I promise that if everything goes well, we will give tzedakah. So bigger than what we meant. So Baruch Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, I'll be very happy to do that.
That's very special. It's nice to always see that kindness. That's really amazing. That's really, really, really good because we hold it in our heart. So the times when we don't see it, we remember the times when we did. And we say it's the same God. So the
Yes.
same one that came through for me here and came through for me here, he's also coming through for me now. I just don't get it. But he knows what he's doing. Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else has something they'd like to share?
Hi, it's Dottie. Hi.
Hi,
Hi. So this very wonderful thing happened this week. Last week, I had recommended somebody for a job, and I accidentally gave the wrong phone number. And then I called the person back with the right phone number. And then I told the person that I think I screwed up the deal because I gave them the wrong phone number. And they were very upset with me because I messed it up. So I spoke to them today, and sure enough, they were hired. They got hired. And I was blaming myself up and down that I had messed it up. But anyways, I'm so grateful that the person started the job and it seems to be working out well. And it was just a horror that I had messed up when I had good intentions. So I'm so grateful to Hashem, the person got the job, because they really was meant a lot to them. Hashem is so kind, you know. This is an older person too. It's hard to find a job when you're older. So I thought it was a miracle. And thanks for letting me share it.
Well, it's so beautiful, Dottie, that your whole heart is in that you're happy that another person found a job and you were able to be part of that process.
Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem.
Baruch Hashem. Anyone else have something they'd like to share? Something they'd like to think?
Just a little something. It's Sarah. So I have a friend who, Baruch Hashem, she was struggling to move, and they found a place. And move. If you ever want to curse anyone out without using bad words, either on a little lower level, you tell them, "I hope you paint," but on a really big level, you tell them, "I hope you move," because it's really hard, right? So anyway, I felt so bad, and there was nothing I could really say to her. She said we couldn't find anything, and I had to light candles because I got her years ago into benching with, and they had no matches, and she said I couldn't light the candles, but I said the bracha, and I hoped it was okay to Hashem. I'm telling you, I choked up from her because that's the thing that was like a stabilizing force for her, and she really, really wanted a bench lift. So she told me, after Shabbos, she got 2 packages of matches, so she wouldn't run into that. So I said, if you run into that, you could probably turn on an electrical light. But I said, I'm sure that Hashem just loves you and is so proud that you wanted to do it so badly. What can you say in a situation like that?
I think you said the right thing.
So, but I thought
I think it's true.
And and they wanted to go. I got her husband to put on tefillin and stuff. So the rabbi was going to finally, after over a year, let them come. And he was going to put on tefillin, with the whole COVID thing. So it's nice to hear that in the middle of all their things that they want certain things still.
Yeah, and they know that these things are going to help them. They understand that this is the way, this is the road. That's a miracle. That they're looking to this as like, this is going to help. This is going to bring the salvation.
But I've told people to bench lift in the kitchen sink if they're afraid their house will go up in fire if they go away after. I said, look, a kitchen sink, nothing's going to catch fire there. But this was the first time someone told me they came up against not having matches. And I said, so you could have lit from the burner. She said, it's an electric stove. So it's very poignant because Yidden all over are wanting to connect. And it's so Mashiach's time, you know, from this little story.
You're right. You're absolutely right. A Jew wanted to connect and she felt bad. And right after Shabbos, she bought matches. Okay, there you see. She's saying, God, I'm not using it as an excuse, as a cop out. Oh, I couldn't like candles. My stove is electric. I don't have matches. No, I'm going and making sure next time I have those matches. Yeah, no, it is. It definitely shows with Sarah's gentle direction where she's coming.
You know, listen, giving over what the Rebbe has taught us is going to do us better. You know, we're doing it to share.
Absolutely. 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 And it's beautiful to be part of that process. It's beautiful to help someone else come close to Hashem.
Baruch Hashem.
Please. Baruch Hashem.
Thank you for all you do for all of us.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else have something they'd like to share? Something they'd like to thank Hashem for? Okay, so let's do the, oh, before, I should have actually said this before people started leaving, I forgot. I was wondering if some people would be interested in coming back to actually a live class. I thought maybe, again, if people are interested, we could even do live. I was planning doing live and Zoom. I was saying, some people are out of town, so they would be the Zoom. But if people would be interested in doing live, you could let me know. We don't have to discuss it now. You could private message me afterwards and see if maybe we could do that. I know it just wondering if we're at that stage in normalization that we could also meet in person and people feel comfortable and feel safe to do that. And then the goal would be to have an in-person class and at the same time, to have the computer set up and have it on Zoom. That's fine. And sorry, I forgot to mention that before people started going off. And more. So this is MR. We have I assume it was 1991. Yeah, and they just.
I would love to do it.
You would love
I would love to do live, absolutely.
When you get back to Chicago.
Well, next week we're heading over.
Bezrat Hashem.
So,
this is from Emor, this week's parsha in 1991. The instruction, therefore, is in simple words in connection to activities that Jews need to do even more to hasten even more the redemption. In addition to all the activities in your own portion in the world, until the entire world, to reveal God as Alufo Shel Olam, which means the master of the world. This is the talk where the Rebbe speaks of Gola, exile. You insert the Aleph and it becomes Geula, redemption. Gola plus Aleph is Geula, redemption, which the Rebbe discussed last week, but in this week he explains what is that Aleph. So that Aleph has 3 levels. One, the basic level is Aleph is Alufo Shel Olam, God is master of the world. And even deeper is Aleph as Elef HaChachma, Elef HaBina, God as he's found in Torah. And even deeper is the letters Aleph. If we switch around the letters, it becomes the word Pella, which is wonder, which means the inner dimension of Torah, even beyond the world. And in all these 3 levels, inserting this Aleph into the world as we know it to create from Gola, Geula, redemption. So to reveal God as Alufo Shel Olam, the Aleph, the master of the world, in this world and in everything in this world, and especially through utilizing all the things of the world for the sake of God. That everything in this world reveals the glory of God. If I use it for him, I'm revealing him through this item. There also has to be a special emphasis in Ulpana, as we said, Aleph, Alufo Shel Olam, revealing God as the master of the world, Aleph as Elef HaChachma, Elef HaBina, Torah. So to put the Aleph of Geula into Gola to create Geula, make exile redemption, we need to add in the Aleph of Torah study, and especially the highest level of the Aleph, the inner dimension of Torah study as revealed in the Torah of Chassidus in a manner of deep understanding of these very, very spiritual, mystical concepts, and to influence others through spreading Torah, through spreading Judaism, through spreading the well springs of Chassidus. And all this should bring Mashiach. And the Rebbe told us this a long time ago, 1991. Now it's 2021. So we should have definitely done it. We've done it. We've done it. We've done it. And we should just see it. Everything we've done, we should see completely reveal. The Aleph should be shining in the Gola to reveal what it truly is, which is Geula, redemption. So thank you so much for joining. Have a wonderful week. We have a week that we see redemption. And if you have a feeling either way about my offer, please send me the message. Yes, that's true. Yes, Baruch Hashem, that is true. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cyril.